My in-laws tried to disinherit my kids because we had children, so I revealed their illegal money laundering scheme. Me, 38F, and my husband, 40M, have been married for 12 years. We have two amazing kids, a son, 10M, and a daughter, 8F. My husband's family has always been a bit difficult. His parents, let's call them Robert, 65M, and Karen, 62F, are incredibly wealthy but also incredibly narcissistic. They've never approved of me, claiming I'm not good enough for their precious son. They've made countless snide remarks about my middle-class upbringing, my career as a teacher, and my average looks. Despite their constant put-downs, I've tried to maintain a polite relationship with them for the sake of my husband and kids. Things took a turn for the worse last year when Robert and Karen decided to update their wills. They called a family meeting and announced that they were leaving the bulk of their massive fortune to my husband's younger brother, David, 35M, and his wife, Samantha, 32F. The reasoning? They claimed that David and Samantha were more deserving because they had chosen to have no children, allowing them to focus solely on their careers and live up to their full potential. My husband and I, on the other hand, were deemed unworthy because we had squandered our lives by having kids. My husband was devastated by this news, but he tried to stay calm and reason with his parents. He pointed out that our kids were their only grandchildren and that it was unfair to punish us for starting a family. Robert and Karen were unmoved, stating that their decision was final. A few months later, we discovered something even more shocking. Robert and Karen had set up a trust fund for David and Samantha's future children, worth a staggering $10 million. Meanwhile, our own kids were left with nothing. We confronted Robert and Karen about this blatant favoritism, but they simply shrugged it off. Our money, our rules, Karen said coldly. If you don't like it, tough luck. At this point, I was seething with anger. How could they treat their own grandchildren with such callous disregard? My husband tried to keep the peace, but I knew we couldn't let this injustice stand. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started doing some digging into Robert and Karen's finances, and what I uncovered was shocking. It turned out that a significant portion of their wealth had been obtained through shady business practices and tax evasion. Robert had been running a complex scheme to funnel money into offshore accounts, avoiding millions in taxes in the process. Armed with this information, I confronted Robert and Karen at their lavish mansion. They tried to deny everything, but I had solid evidence, bank statements, financial records, and even recorded conversations between Robert and his shady accountant. You've built your empire on a foundation of lies and criminal activities, I spat at them. And now you're using that ill-gotten wealth to punish your own grandchildren simply for existing. Robert and Karen were livid, but they couldn't deny the facts I had presented. They threatened to sue me for slander and tried to bully me into keeping quiet, but I stood my ground. If you don't change your wills and treat our kids fairly, I'll take this evidence straight to the IRS and the authorities, I warned them. Your precious fortune will be gone, and you'll be facing serious criminal charges. For a moment, I thought they might call my bluff. But then, I saw the fear in their eyes. They knew I had them cornered. With gritted teeth, Robert agreed to update their wills, ensuring that our kids would receive an equal share of their inheritance. As for the trust fund, they begrudgingly agreed to set up an identical one for our children, worth the same $10 million. It wasn't enough to make up for their cruelty, but it was a start. However, the battle was far from over. David and Samantha caught wind of what had happened and were furious. They accused me of extortion and threatened to take legal action against me. I wasn't deterred. I had already made copies of the evidence I had gathered and distributed it to trusted friends and family members, just in case Robert and Karen tried to backtrack or retaliate. Things escalated when David and Samantha decided to play dirty. They hired a private investigator to dig into my past, hoping to find something they could use against me. The PI uncovered some minor indiscretions from my college days, underage drinking, a small drug possession charge that had been expunged from my record. They tried to use these to paint me as a degenerate and discredit me in front of Robert and Karen. But I wasn't fazed. I had already come clean with my husband about my past mistakes, and he stood by me. I reminded Robert and Karen that, unlike their beloved son David, I had never engaged in any illegal activities to accumulate wealth. At least I've lived an honest life and raised my children with integrity, I told them. Can you say the same? Faced with the threat of exposure and criminal charges, Robert and Karen begrudgingly stuck to our agreement. To ensure that Robert and Karen couldn't go back on their word, I insisted that they have the updated wills and trust funds notarized and filed with a reputable law firm. I also made sure to keep meticulous records of all our interactions and communications. Robert and Karen grumbled and complained, but they knew they had no choice but to comply. They were trapped, and they knew it. David and Samantha, on the other hand, were furious. They threatened to contest the updated wills and trust funds, but their lawyers advised them against it, given the evidence I had against Robert and Karen. In the end, they had to accept the new arrangements, albeit through gritted teeth. They cut off all contact with us, which was honestly a relief. The aftermath of this ordeal was emotionally draining for all of us. My husband was torn, grateful that I had fought for our kids' rights, but also saddened by the rift it had caused within his family. Our kids, bless their hearts, handled it with grace and maturity beyond their years. They understood that their grandparents' actions were wrong and that we had done what was necessary to protect their futures. As for me, I have no regrets. Robert and Karen's greed and narcissism knew no bounds, and they had to be stopped. Yes, the methods I used were extreme, but sometimes, nuclear revenge is the only way to deal with toxic people like them. At the end of the day, I did what any good parent would do. I fought tooth and nail to ensure my children's well-being and their rightful inheritance. And if that makes me the evil one in Robert and Karen's eyes, then so be it. I'll wear that label with pride. Break story 2. Me, 38F, and my husband Jack, 40M, have been married for 12 years. We have 2 kids, a son Tommy, 10M, and a daughter Emma, 7F. We've had our fair share of ups and downs like any couple, but overall, our marriage has been pretty solid. That is, until my narcissistic mother-in-law Diane, 65F, came into the picture. Diane has never really approved of me. From the moment Jack and I started dating, she made snide comments about my appearance, my career, my family, you name it. When we got engaged, she threw a massive fit, claiming I was just a gold digger after Jack's family money. We tried to have a good relationship with her for the sake of Jack's dad, but it was always an uphill battle. After the kids were born, things only got worse. Diane would constantly criticize my parenting skills, telling me I was too strict or too lenient. She'd buy the kids expensive gifts without consulting us, clearly trying to buy their affection. It was a never-ending power struggle. The final straw came last month when Diane showed up at our house unannounced while Jack was at work. I was in the backyard with the kids, playing fetch with our beloved golden retriever, Buddy. Buddy had been a part of our family for 8 years, and the kids absolutely adored him. When I went inside to grab some water, I noticed Diane's car in the driveway. Thinking she was just dropping something off, I wasn't too concerned. But when I came back outside, Buddy was gone, and Diane was getting into her car with a suspicious-looking bundle in her arms. I ran over to her car, panicked. "Diane, where's Buddy? What did you do with him?" I demanded. She gave me a sickly sweet smile. "Oh, don't worry dear, I'm just taking him for a little ride. He'll be much happier with me." My heart dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You can't just take our dog. Bring him back right now." But before I could stop her, she peeled out of the driveway, Buddy's pitiful whimpers fading into the distance. I was in hysterics when Jack came home that evening. The kids were devastated, crying for their beloved pet. Jack immediately called Diane, furious, but she acted like she had done nothing wrong. "Buddy is better off with me," she said coolly. "You two work all the time and never give that poor dog the attention he deserves. I'm just doing what's best for him." "You had no right to take him without our permission," Jack shouted. "Bring him back, or I swear I'll call the police." She laughed. "Like they'd take your side over a loving grandmother's, but go ahead and try, dear." For the next few days, we tried desperately to reason with Diane, to no avail. She refused to give Buddy back, claiming he was happier with her. The kids could barely function, losing their beloved companion so suddenly. I wanted to respect Jack's wishes to handle this civilly, but my rage was boiling over. How dare she just steal our dog and pretend she had done nothing wrong? This was a new low, even for her narcissistic ways. Jack set up a meeting with her under the pretense of working things out. Little did she know, I had already filed a police report for dognapping and planned to have her arrested when she showed up. The day of the meeting, Diane arrived around noon, strolling in like she didn't have a care in the world. Jack let her in and we all sat in the living room, the tension palpable. "I'm glad you two finally came to your senses," she said smugly. "Buddy is doing just wonderfully with me. I knew you'd see reason eventually." That's when I gave the signal, and 2 police officers entered the room. "Diane Matthews, you're under arrest for theft of property," one of them stated. "You have the right to remain silent." Diane's face turned beet red as the officers cuffed her hands behind her back. "How dare you? I'm his grandmother, I can take care of that mangy mutt if I want. Jack, control your wife at once." But Jack just shook his head, looking utterly disgusted. "What you did was illegal, mother. Maybe this time behind bars will finally make you see how unacceptable your behavior is." As they led her out to the patrol car, she was screaming insults and threats the whole way. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. She had finally gone too far. Though Diane was out on bail within a few hours, we got a restraining order preventing her from coming near our home or family. We thought that would be the end of it, but we were gravely mistaken. A few days later, some of Diane's cronies, I swear, that woman was the queen of a mean girls club, started harassing us online and over the phone. They left cruel voicemails calling me every name in the book for turning his own mother into the cops. My social media was flooded with vicious comments about what a terrible wife and mother I was for breaking up the family. Some even threatened physical violence if I didn't drop the charges against Diane. Things only escalated from there. Rocks were thrown through our windows, with vile messages scratched into them. Crude graffiti about me was spray painted on our garage door. Wherever we went, Diane's little minions would show up and make snide remarks or accidentally bump into the kids. We were living in abject terror, jumping at every noise or unexpected visitor. The kids could barely even go to school without getting tormented about their criminal grandma. It was a nightmare, all because Diane couldn't accept the consequences of her actions. Jack and I discussed taking more legal action, but Diane's slimy lawyer threatened to drag the kids into court and put them through even more trauma. We felt absolutely trapped. The worst came a few weeks later when I was alone at home. There was a loud bang at the door, followed by angry shouts. When I didn't open up, the banging only intensified until crash. The front door burst open and 3 large men barged into the house. From the looks of their greasy hair and prison tattoos, it was obvious these were hired thugs. My heart pounded as they approached me menacingly. "This is just a warning from Mrs. Matthews," one of them growled. "Drop the charges or next time, we'll really make you sorry." With that, they shoved me to the floor and stormed out, leaving me trembling in fear. That's when I knew involving the police was no longer enough. We needed to take drastic action. First thing the next morning, Jack and I went straight to Diane's high-priced lawyer's office and told him loudly and clearly, if Diane didn't stop her intimidation tactics immediately, we would file charges of criminal harassment, stalking, making terrorist threats, and hiring thugs to commit assault and home invasion. And that was just for starters. The smug look dropped off the lawyer's face real quick. He tried placating us at first, saying Diane was just blowing off steam and meant no real harm. But I showed him the video footage from our security cameras of the goons breaking in, and he realized we had more than enough evidence to bury Diane under a mountain of charges. Within 24 hours, the harassment suddenly stopped. No more threatening calls, no one followed us, and our property remained untouched. We knew the lawyer must have finally gotten through Diane's thick skull about the legal ramifications she was facing. Sure enough, a few days later Diane's lawyer contacted us about working out a plea deal. In exchange for us dropping the more serious charges, Diane pled guilty to the original theft charge for taking Buddy. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail and had to pay a hefty fine. But the best part? She was legally required to return Buddy to us and prohibited from ever contact him or us again. It was a small price to pay to have our beloved dog back home where he belonged. When we brought Buddy back home, the kids were overjoyed. They showered him with hugs, kisses, and treats, not wanting to let him out of their sight for a second. Seeing their smiling faces again after so much torment was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. However, the emotional trauma of Diane's vindictive campaign wasn't so easily erased. The kids had nightmares for weeks after the home invasion, afraid those men would come back. Every unexpected noise made us all jump. Jack and I ended up seeking therapy, both for ourselves and to help the kids process what had happened. Why our own family member was capable of such cruelty and viciousness over a pet was hard to comprehend. Ultimately, the sad truth is that you can't choose your relatives, only how much power you give them in your life. Diane has been cut off completely. We've blocked her on everything and told Jack's dad will no longer attend any family events she'll be at. It's a shame it had to come to that, but her toxic, narcissistic behavior left us no choice. Though it's been a long road to healing, we're slowly recovering as a family unit. Buddy has been an infinitely sweet source of comfort, his wagging tail and slobbery kisses reminding us of the good that came out of standing up to Diane's evil bullying. We've emerged from this nightmare stronger than ever before. Toxic family or not, we'll stick together through anything. After all, the truest family is the one you choose to keep by your side through the darkest of times. And for us, Buddy will always be a part of that chosen family.